United States of Lead is an informative podcast that may contain sensitive material and the occasional F-bomb. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to the United States of Lead, a podcast about crime, mental decline, and the lead thread that links them. This week, we are going to focus on symptoms of chronic lead exposure and the current crisis we are facing here in America. I also had noted that I totally forgot. I know I mentioned already, though, but my Lead-Blooded Kids Bop song, I still need to finish the lyrics.
I see in the notes, it's just sort of dangling, like, you know what it is, Paul. You know what it is. It's in your head, yeah.
And I did have it in my head the entire time writing notes, just lead-blooded, check it and see. That is the topic this week, lead-blooded Americans. Before we get into it, just a reminder to listeners that here are some of the psychiatric implications of chronic lead exposure found in a 2019 case report, which will be cited in our sources. Quote, somatic disorders, mental status or personality changes, fatigue, irritability, personality changes, anxiety, aggression, dizziness, stress, depression, end quote. We have noted too, because there's just so many different symptoms to this. Some other noted chronic lead exposure symptoms are apathy, hallucinations, tremors, loss of coordination, weakness, tingling, convulsions, insomnia, and loss of appetite. And there are obviously physical side effects too, such as high blood pressure, heart disease, etc. But for this episode, we are going to focus on the neuropsychiatric aspects of chronic lead exposure. But I think you can see how we see so many of these symptoms in our society today.
When I was looking at this, I thought, I'm glad we're putting this back. I'm glad we're starting off with this. We should really remind people about these symptoms. But then I was thinking, how come this isn't common knowledge? It's with lead being so prevalent, I was even like, I'm glad that's here, just to sort of remind me heart disease and higher blood pressure. Just a reminder, water's wet. It should just be something that we all know about, which is just proof that we need to talk more about this.
Yeah, and I know I've mentioned before that it's not just the United States, but there are things here that seem to be more prevalent than other places, but just worldwide. I mean, I know I told you that study in India where they estimated, I think it was 1.8 million deaths last year were just from air pollution. And the fact that we don't talk about this. But anyways, back to lead-blooded Americans. If you've listened to our podcast since the beginning, you will remember how we touched briefly on lead poisoning's links to the fall of the Roman Empire. We also drew comparisons in that episode between events in ancient Rome that led to the fall and events in the United States currently happening and that have happened in the recent past. So when I opened the news app on my phone and saw this article about a person in Rome, Georgia, whose online name is Burn It Down, I knew this was a synchronicity I could not ignore. I remember I sent that almost instantaneous of me opening my phone. And that was a couple of weeks ago, but I was just like, you can't make this shit up. That's insane. How? So the person featured in this article is the perfect example of what I am going to refer to as a lead-blooded American. As I have hypothesized before, when it comes to certain neuropsychiatric symptoms of lead poisoning, it seems as though lead acts as an accelerant to underlying mental health concerns with adults and also physical, but we're not, like I said, we're not really touching on that too much in this episode. And there seems to be a sector of supposed, quote, red-blooded Americans whose mental instability seems to be on overdrive. When I read through this article from the Washington Post about this person named Angela Rubino, aka Burn It Down, it furthered my belief in the correlations between lead exposure and the decline we are witnessing and experiencing. Quick side note, this article is definitely worth the full read, and it also looks like there's an audio version that you can listen to. The article is from Stephanie McCrummen. I hope I pronounced your name right. I'm so sorry. For the Washington Post, published on June 11th, 2022, quote, 6 years into the grassroots movement unleashed by Donald Trump in his first presidential campaign, Angela Rubino is a case study in what the movement is becoming. Suspicious of almost everything, trusting of almost nothing, believing in almost no one other than those who share her unease. She has in many ways become a citizen of a parallel America, not just red America, but another America entirely. One she believes to be awash in domestic enemies, stolen elections, immigrant invaders, sexual predators, the machinations of global elite, and other fresh nightmares revealed by the minute on her social media scrolls. She is known online as Burn It Down, end quote. It's important to note, too, that Rubino lives in the congressional district of Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. And as Stephanie McCrummen notes, quote, the representative of the 14th Congressional District of America is how one local Republican has described Greene, whose district is mostly white, mostly rural, and has long been abandoned by national Democrats. The smartest district in the USA is how Greene has described her followers, end quote. So obviously I had to look and see just how smart they are.
Right.
I mean, it's like when you hear something like that, it's like, okay, well, let's just take a look at the statistics. As the World Population Review's 2022 ranking of U.S. literacy rates by state, that opinion is of Marjorie Taylor Greene's is very subjective about them being the smartest district in the USA. And also worth noting that Rome City School District, which is ranked within the bottom 50% of all 210 school districts in Georgia. And if you look at this graph, they are not just dropping in their ranking, but the decline is shockingly dramatic. So I am going to share my screen quick. So that's their school district and the average in Georgia. And just look at how it plummeted. It rose in 2015, so it'd be interesting to see what happened in 2015. And then, boom, back down again. But no matter what, even when it rose up, it was still farther than it was before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just had to share that because I saw the dramatic, sharp decline, and I just couldn't believe how dramatic it was. And also want to note, too, that I don't remember if I brought this up, but I kind of think I did, that over half the U.S. population currently is considered illiterate. I think it's 54% of the U.S. is officially considered illiterate, reading below a 6th grade level.
I'm positive we've talked about this in the past.
Okay.
Because working in adult basic education and workforce development, it is absolutely 100% true that there's like different levels of literacy, and most Americans are functionally illiterate, which is a weird way of saying it. I don't know enough about it, about this scale. I'm not, like, I can't assess anyone in this. How training has to be for like an entry level position, it has to be geared for like 5th and 6th grade literacy. The issue that I have is that we're really only acknowledging like one kind of intelligence, because
true.
the long-term plan, the 50-year plan, completely erode Roe v. Wade is that was not dumb. That was a lot of people doing a lot of really hard work in an evil way, in a racist, disgusting way, but not stupid. I think there's this like knee-jerk reaction for us to just point at someone's reading score and say that they're not intelligent, but that's one side, and I would love to get into that. But the other thing that's more important is I feel like there's an amount of brain matter labor, or it's thinking. And what I mean by this is these QAnon supporters spend a lot of time in their brain. They spend a lot of
Yeah.
time thinking. So
There's a lot of red lines going.
there's
Like,
so many red. That's such a
yeah.
great. There's so many red lines. There's so many connections. There's equations going on in their head. They
Yeah.
can bounce this off. They can meet other people, like-minded people, and they say the same. They parrot the same information back, just like a republic of letters. They just like an academic setting. So the idea of like presenting this kind of shaming or anti-thought effort, like there's a lot of thought effort, there's a lot of kind of thinking going on with to be like, you're not a good thinker, you're not smart. I'm just imagining that sounding completely ridiculous to Marjorie Taylor Greene, even though she's crazy, horrible person, but she probably has more things going on in her head than I do. You know what I'm saying? Like there's more stuff going on to keep this worldview afloat than
Yeah.
because I can just sit back and eat Snickers and be okay with, I
Thing
don't
is,
know.
though, I don't think Marjorie Taylor Greene is part of that population. I mean, she does say some absolutely, well, no, she definitely is. Because what did she call, the words that she's accidentally interpreted wrong?
Is that the Gazpacho police?
Yes, the Gazpacho police. And there was one other one recently. It had to do with fascism, and I can't remember, but she swapped the word. But I would say, though, that it might not hinder your thinking, but that it might hinder your critical thinking. And that I believe there's a connection between illiteracy and critical thinking, where you can see outside the opinion that you have to see the overall picture. It's a very narrow-minded, quote, intelligence that they have.
I'm saying ultimately we're not benefiting from that kind of classification. Like we're not benefiting by pigeonholing these people or excluding them from, well, that's not what I'm trying to say.
Well, I can say that the reason
please.
I'm bringing this up is because this has been normalized as being okay.
Yes.
And that's where it's scary, because this correlates to the defunding of education that has been happening over the past couple decades. The rise of this insanity is parallel to the drastic defunding of our education system.
It has to be defunded too, because it doesn't fit with their worldview. So after they spend all this time inside there, that's really so that's where was trying to bring this, was like, it takes so much energy to maintain this fantasy. We all have our own little fantasies, like, I'm really good at my job, or I'm a great driver. I'm sure that's a fantasy that my wife believes about that I have. And that we all have these kind of fantasies, but they have a fantasy about immigrants coming to get you, and it's all about these shared grievances. It has nothing to do with,
that aren't based in reality.
It has nothing to do with where we want to go. It has nothing to do with the production of personal and communal value. It has nothing to do with a shared vision for the future. It's a shared vision of subtraction. We need to get rid of these things in order to feel safe again.
I want to go back to the tobacco company, where after the bans happened and they lost, and instead of, moving on, they had to figure out a way to get their power back.
That's such a great parallel.
And that internal document, because it happened, that was in the 90s, and the defunding of education, like the big, like when Scott Walker did the union busting and really started, all the red states started to copy him with defunding education, happened in the early 2000s. And so internal tobacco companies saying, we just have to feed them misinformation and they won't know what to believe. I guarantee you somewhere they had this discussion.
Yeah.
We need to defund education. We can't allow people to think critically. You need your workforce to blindly just do what you want them to do and not question And it's funny because all these people are like, well, but I'm questioning everything. And it's like, you're doing exactly what they wanted you to do. And you don't even realize you're doing it. The correlation is very easy between the defunding of education and the rise of this insanity. Because like, it's always been there. This is who we are. This is the Tea Party. This is the people who were in England and said, fuck you, I'm not paying my taxes. I'll just go invade this land and take it over. That is what this country is founded on, and we have to accept that. Is it who we like to believe we are? No, but we have to come to terms with our history. And like I said, that they don't want to teach real history because you said it disrupts their idea of what their agenda is and what their future is. And why I brought up before the episode, how there's red states that now are wanting to pass bills to teach, quote, both sides of the Holocaust. It's absolute insanity. It's so easy for radicals with radical agendas to rise to power and be supported in this climate because, as I mentioned, that's where we are. And that's something we have to get into now, but this is definitely something that we'll be discussing in a new podcast that we will be starting called Cult of Corporation, where we are going to dive deeper into manifest destiny culture of corporate America, and not only corporate America, I mean, it's international. But there's a link that we really need to draw more attention to, because with the rise of corporate power in making government decisions, that leads to fascism, and we can see that very clearly right now.
It's its own kind of poison. It's its own kind of poison. Yeah.
Everything in life should be, I always say the Delphic oracles, know thyself and nothing in excess. And we really got to bring that balance back between the power that corporations have and the power that we have. Because like I mentioned, like it went from corporations having regulations and responsibilities to now you just deal with it. We're going to do whatever we want and you have to figure it out. That power dynamic switch is pretty alarming. But back to this Washington Post article, quote, those followers, which are referring to Marjorie Taylor Greene's followers, including Rubino, a married 40-year-old mother of two, a New York transplant who had worked in restaurants and flipped houses for a living, and once believed politics was only for the powerful, end quote. Now, I read this, and now knowing what we know regarding lead exposure, I saw that she flipped houses in New York and could not help but speculate the amount of lead that she was exposed to.
That's super interesting.
Yeah, everything about this article was just this like, here you go, Andrea, of like making connections. So I decided to do some digging, and I found an inactive Twitter account that appears to be Rubino's, and it features flipped homes in New York and references home renovations in Rome, Georgia. So obviously it's her. Like the idea that there would be another Angela Rubino who lived in New York and Rome, Georgia, probably not.
strange competitor in the market.
And so again, who she once believed politics was only for the powerful. When looking at her Twitter, it's a lot of, her trying to like do these GoFundMes to renovate houses and, get the money and this and that, and clearly feeling disempowered.
Mm-hmm.
And again, why people like this are so susceptible. You want to have some sort of control in your life and you don't. And this radical agenda and narrative gives you that cult of people where you feel that you do have it. And with the rise of like Marjorie Taylor Greene, oh, well, she's just like me. I can do this too. And so it gives you that notion, because like all of her tweets, like she's tweeting at those, God, what was that guy's name? Chet or Chip? One of those
Chip
big
and Joanna Gaines.
Yes. And so she like ats them and like, she's trying to get this power and she doesn't get it. And those are the people that are most susceptible to this. And so it was just so interesting reading through her. And I highly suggest you take a look at it before they delete it. So there's a lot. Go ahead.
I'm blown away by this, like, chip in to help me make money. Like, it's not a GoFundMe where you get stuff, right? It's.
Well, so that I clicked on the GoFundMe and it's no longer active. So I can't see It was specifically for renovating Rome, Georgia. I like old places in Rome, Georgia.
Okay. Okay.
But then I think she had ones for New York too, because all the links are inactive, but some of the descriptions specifically talk about renovating places from Georgia. And that's the sad thing is like these old dilapidated towns and this concept of why the money isn't there. Well, it's because of the Democrats. That's why you don't have money for, it's that spinning of not the corporations that are running everything being not paying their taxes. And then them getting you to believe that you shouldn't have to. It'd really be interesting now that I thought about that. I want to do an episode on the OG Tea Party and the people who convinced people not to pay their taxes and to flee. I really want to do like a more in-depth connection between that just to see.
I think we're beautifully off topic right now, but right where we need to be. And that is very astute. Anti-tax.
Yeah.
Anti-vax, anti-intellectual.
They're going to use that. That works too well. Anti-tax, anti-vax.
Yeah. I don't know. I keep coming back to this idea. This is my foundation. This is my new foundational thinking is that this is all about being able to tell people what to do and being able to not be told what to do.
Yes.
I think it's just that simple. And
that is what we were founded on. And we have to accept that. It doesn't mean that me and you and people listening have that belief, but this country was founded on that. And if that's not who we are.
When this GoFundMe effort, it just appears. And I'm also like putting my own personal experience with people who have done GoFundMes like this, where like, it's like, help me fix my porch. No. Help me. I don't know if you've had a traumatic brain injury, let's talk. But anyway, this is just externalized taxation, right? This is just unstrategic taxation. Like, let's pull, I don't want us to get taxed, but let's pool all of our resources together so that we can benefit in a specific area, but that area is mine.
That is such a perfect correlation.
So, you pointed it out.
Well, you drove it home though. And I was looking on social media and they showed the median pay to have a livable wage, like what the livable wage is to sustain yourself, and how it's dropped $22,000 from I think 2002 to 2022 or something like that. Used to be like 68,000 was the mean, and now it's like 45 or something crazy.
That's the livable wage?
The median livable wage, yeah, of what you can make to like have a good life, basically.
Sure.
Not just get by, but like.
Yeah.
And it's dropped even though price, like, so it just showed like, it's like nothing correlates. And then these disenfranchised people who can't use critical thinking then automatically get sucked into this because you're right. We are in a really crappy place and it really does suck, but you're looking at the wrong people, so it's that idea of taking part of a truth, shocker, the corporations, tobacco, just give them a part of the truth. Just leave out this part. They're doing it. And it's sad. That's the thing is it's really sad because who's making still billions and billions of profits? The corporations are, the CEOs are, not the workers. But it's just very frustrating because all of that money that, they want to renovate Rome, Georgia could be coming from corporations getting taxed like they're supposed to.
Right.
There's a lot of speculating we can do regarding the tweets on this account, but I'd like to come back to that in our after episode discussion because there's a lot to look at. The one speculation I will share now is from one of the tweets that she has from a house in New York she shares as a listing, and it's in Middleton, New York. So obviously I had to do a quick Google search for that area to see if there's anything related to lead poisoning. And the first things that pop up from June 8th, 2022, so clearly recently, quote, Newburgh and Middleton are at different stages of tracking and removing water lines with lead in them. and the stakes are life and death, end quote. So clearly they got a lead problem. And the Orange County Lead Poisoning Prevention, which is the county they're in, they state, quote, the city of Newburgh and the city of Middleton, with high rates of childhood lead poisoning, asthma, triggers, and other environmental health hazards, end quote. So there's that. It's interesting seeing certain correlations. Like I said, I think I brought this up with like the Green River Killer,
Right.
who worked in the paint department at an automotive manufacturer. Like, come on, people. That correlation there, it's like, okay, can I say that this is what it is? No, but can I draw some conclusions and speculate? Absolutely. Back to this Washington Post article, quote, Rubino saw a person like herself in Marjorie Taylor Greene, a political outsider who shared the same sense of urgency about the same dystopian America, one that required a popular uprising to save it. To that end, Rubino had so far managed to rally enough people to get the county election board ousted, replacing its members with those who believed that the 2020 election was stolen. She was part of a group called the Domestically Terrorized Moms that was pressing the local school board to get rid of curriculum they believed to be grooming children for sexual predators, end quote. They banded together and ousted their county election board. So let's talk about this concept of them putting in their own election officials. Even here in Wisconsin, they decided that the ballot drop-off boxes are illegal.
Yeah, that's really scary.
Very scary. And
but did they also decide that you can't drop someone else's? Is that somewhere else?
I'm not sure. Like, because you can still drop it off, but you can't put it in one of those secured ballot boxes. You have to give it to a counting official or vote in person. I
feel like I heard somewhere else that someone made it illegal for like me to return your.
Oh yeah.
If I lived with my mother or my wife.
And she's not able
to. I couldn't just bring them both in. We both had to.
Absolutely. They're going to make it as difficult as possible.
Yeah.
Also, too, I did find her Facebook profile. And I'm so shocked that she's part of that movement saying that drag queens are grooming kids by like these drag queen brunches and drag queens reading at schools. You know, this idea of grooming children for sexual predators. And it's just so narrow-minded. And again, part of lead poisoning, like how it makes your brain wired a certain way. You don't see the grooming and sexual predators in the church.
Yeah. You're voting for Joe Arpaio. You're supporting Brett Kavanaugh.
It's the hypocrisy.
Yeah.
And they don't see it. Like Angela Rubino doesn't see it. I'm not saying the people who are orchestrating this don't see it. They know that misinformation is how they're going to get their way. They know the chaos is how they're going to keep their power.
That's something that maybe we could look into with the cult of corporation is that, like, what kind of Kool-Aid are different groups drinking?
Mm-hmm.
The picture that I'm painting from what you're saying, or that you've painted so well, is like, you know, one group of people believing something and then another group of people orchestrating it. And I wonder if there's even another level, which is like the Steve Bannons of the world who are very, very, very aware of their agendas. Like they want a specific thing. They're willing to use white supremacy. They are white supremacists, but they'll burn it down to rule over the ashes.
Yeah.
That's what they want. And then there's another group of people, like who we're talking about, who are worried about teachers becoming drag queen groomers, which is who teach nothing but legal theory on critical race theory and make white people feel uncomfortable. But then I wonder if there's another like group in power that has another kind of blinder that they ritually wear. I know there's someone in the boardroom at the cigarette company pulling the strings, but I feel like there must be other people in the boardroom who have their own kind of crazy going on. I don't know.
It's worth looking into, though. I feel like, too, with a lot of the stuff that we do, like these things kind of fall into our feeds and onto our news stuff.
Right.
So, you know what I mean? So I guess there's a pro to that.
Well, Synchronicity is a real thing. It's
Heck yeah.
sorry for getting off topic.
No, I feel like it wasn't necessarily off topic. It's important to emphasize, too, that Rubino is not alone. From that same Washington Post article, quote, there was a military contractor who said he'd been reading a Russian book about CIA-sponsored regime change operations, which he believed included the last U.S. presidential election. There were women who believed public schools were indoctrinating children with left-wing ideology, retirees who believed that the coronavirus was a bioweapon, a mechanic who wore earbuds all day streaming War Room, a podcast in which former Trump strategist, who you just mentioned, Stephen K. Bannon, was urging people to take over local Republican parties, end quote. Now, can we talk a bit about the people that were just mentioned? Military contractor, school teachers, mechanics. These are all professions that have a higher risk of lead exposure. And it would be one thing if these radicals were simply getting on their soapboxes with themselves and spewing nonsense to each other, but they're heavily armed. And we have seen, obviously, the rise of shootings in this country, and the accessibility and marketing for guns and ammo has also been on the rise for decades. And we've already discussed the dramatic risks of lead exposure from lead ammunition. Oh, and also, too, they discuss how at this place they have gun accessories, like with Trump and the American flag and all this stuff. It's to just show how their culture is surrounded by guns and ammunition and just the amount of exposure that must be there. But yeah, again, highly recommend that you just read this full article all the way through, because it's worth the read. She's digging in dumpsters, finding shredded paper and banding people together to get these bags, and each individual tiny shred of paper, connect them all together and tape them together to see what they said from the election places. So people's addresses, phone numbers, criminal records.
That's so much effort.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
And what you could be doing instead.
Well,
you know what I mean?
I keep coming back to this idea of like shaming them. Like there's clearly a lot of passion and effort in this. And it's like, what am I trying to say? I don't think I could sway this person by pointing out what they don't know, because they think that they've done so much.
They know more than you.
They clearly know more than me because they're digging in dumpsters. I'm not digging in dumpsters. I'll just Google something. Saying.
The alarming implication of the defunding of education.
Right.
It's like arguing with a toddler. You know, if the toddler says that this is this, and you having the experience and education that you have to say, well, actually, that's not true, you're not going to convince that toddler until it affects them or they experience it. And even then they might not, you know, and so it's just that idea of your brain needs to develop to a certain place to be able to draw these conclusions rationally. If you're stunted to think in a certain way, like if your brain doesn't exceed that, you might not be able to draw those conclusions before it's too late.
This is just a question. What if this is a totally rational outcome from, like you were saying, this inability to accept the truth? So we have had this education system, a rather robust education system for, quite a while, public education for quite a while, but we've been pushing things that are not true, like America creating itself and not stealing a bunch of land, and America building itself and not robbing human beings of their lives and keeping them in chattel slavery. So is the thing that we really learn, is it our ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, or is it how to mask, like the real lesson from education is it how to mask a fantasy? And is this the outcome of that, where we've just gone long without actually acknowledging something? It's like, well, we couldn't really ever acknowledge this, so it has to be aliens. We can't actually acknowledge this, so it has to be
I have to say,
immigrants.
too, so this is what I believe.
Yeah.
Because it's not like to say, too, that all states have the same quality education.
Sure.
I mean, I grew up in a school district that had a lot of money to go towards education. Went to a college that had a very great program. I think, too, is that it's connected to the narcissism. So it's a lot of these people too only see from, like you said, that idea of America, and they don't see outside of themselves or outside of America.
Sure.
When I got to the U and I had my American Indian studies and learning about the reality of America being founded, that was absolutely shocking. And it did go, I'm like, oh my God, everything that I was taught about, the school plays that we had with the Indians and the Pilgrims,
Sure.
hugging and dancing, all of that was a lie. But I did not, from that instant, then spiral, you know what I mean? It's that idea, then that's the spiral, like all of those truths were very hard. And it did cause me to learn more about it and educate myself more. But it opened my mind. It wanted me to broaden my perspective, where I feel like what is happening here is it's the opposite.
Right.
They don't want to see outside of it. It's only this. It's the two polar opposites of where you can go with finding out information that you didn't know before, I guess. I don't know if I worded that right, but there's always two ways you can look at something. There's always two ways you can use knowledge. The same with the corporations. They could be doing things much differently with their power and money to further humanity if they wanted to, but they're not. It's like, Star Wars, the Force. How are you going to use the Force?
Oh.
The two ways of people using the Force. All of this dismantling and crumbling, regardless of what perspective you're seeing it on, needed to happen in a sense. Like you said, a lot of what we were taught is not accurate. We do need to come to terms with who we are as a country, how this country was founded. This narrative where this, saying that, they don't want to pay their taxes, even though if the people who actually had to pay their taxes paid their taxes, you'd be better off, just shows it doesn't make sense. And that's the thing is I'm trying very hard not to make sense out of things that don't make sense, because sometimes you can't make sense out of things that don't make sense, but I want to understand why they follow it. And I think it all comes down to critical thinking. They see themselves as being disenfranchised and their quality of life has gone down, their health has gone down, their pay has gone down, but all of these things that are happening to them aren't happening for the reasons they're saying they're happening. And that's the problem. If more people could be like, yeah, you're right, your life does suck right now, but this is not the person causing it.
I've heard people describe this as like someone who washes a mirror to clean their face. And I feel like it does make sense if we look at it, which you and I have both done. If we look at it just from this lens of, I'm going to call it like the deal of misogyny or like the deal of racism. I get to be male, so I should have this certain status or power or the ability to tell people off. I'm white, so I have this certain ability to be free of certain burdens, or at least throw these burdens onto someone else, or at least at the very least I get to not have less than other people in society. Like, that's a really weird equation to base a country on. And I'm asserting that that's what we've done. Like, there are some people, these 1%ers who, getting back to that, who like might have a very aware, open, conscious view of like, nope, we're pulling your strings. Yep, this is totally what we do. But the captains of the ship or the next level down, I wonder if they're sort of part of this too, and they don't quite, they've drank their own kind of Kool-Aid. And then what I'm really trying to get at this is, I don't know if it's an education issue where people have to be taught something as much as you just said this, where people just need to have enough food. They need to have like pipes that don't kill them and paint chips that don't ruin their kids'
It's
brains.
a distraction from what's important.
Right. Let's live good lives. And instead of like, I need to fight for my extra $1 an hour at the dollar store. Like, the reason why we don't have healthcare, universal healthcare in this country, is that the majority of white people don't want to see black and brown people do well. I mean, like,
I don't know. I don't think that's it. I think because it was going to pop in my head. Mm-hmm. I think there's a small minority of white people who don't want that, and they convince a larger majority of white people of the reasons to scare, because I saw a tweet about somebody talking about how if minimum wage went up to $15, your Taco Bell is going to cost $38. And this person going, minimum wage in Washington is $15 and a Taco Bell, whatever, chalupa is like $3.80. The uneducated, quote, disenfranchised white people see that person that they look to on Fox News who says your chalupa is going to cost $38 if minimum wage goes up to 15, and they believe it. And it's the same with healthcare. There's this weird idea that it's going to cost them. It's going to take more from them because so much has been taken from them. And it's just complete ignorance. I think there's definitely, yes, there is a sector of white people who do see it from that. But I think there's the half and half. There's the people who have very intentional reasonings for that. And then there's the people who, actually, I'm going to say there's three. There's the people who have the power, the very intentional, super racist. There's the people who that are racist and disenfranchised and just stupid enough to follow along with the narrative because they see themselves, like you said, superior than others. And then there's a sector that's just completely flippant ignorant and see it as just the money part of like, I don't have anything now. I'm going to have less if this happens.
So I don't disagree with you with that, but I do disagree with you about the relationship of systemic racism and agency. And I would say that everyone involved in that is participating in racism.
They're participating. I don't think they're aware.
I would even say, sure. And that's a big part of the problem, right?
That's what I mean. And hence education.
And I would even say, I would go so far as to say that they are racist in that regard. Like they are participating in race. They are benefiting from a racist system. They're producing their own, they're producing their identity through the lens of racial division, racial superiority, racial whatever.
Absolutely.
And this applies to misogyny. It applies to a number of different systemic oppressive systems. I would say that my statement about just because someone doesn't have an active agency about, like they don't have an active awareness of how they're behaving, they're still participating in that, which is what I think we have to acknowledge as opposed to and this is a view of racism. I'm not
saying they're participating. I'm saying that there's people that aren't intentionally doing it.
Oh, and I'm not disagreeing with that one bit. Absolutely. Because it's like a fish saying, not realizing that water's wet. Like they're just moving around. And they're not intentionally doing it. They don't want to burn a cross on someone, but they also don't, like you just said, but they also will do something where they'll say, I don't want the little that I have to go to someone else. Yes. I don't want the little that I feel I deserve to be taken from me by these other people. And that's that's someone who's caught in a racist system.
It's not taken from them. It's taken from the billionaires, the oligarchs. You know 100%. What I mean? Like they don't even get that. So they don't even get it.
100%. They've been educated to believe in this scarcity in one part,
where it's
that they deserve this kind of thing for this reason. Yeah. And then another part of it's going to be taken from me. They're trapped. They're trapped. They're oppressed by it as well, which is a weird thing to say, but no one's benefiting from this except for these small
again, all you gotta do is look at them and their little tiny sector of system. What? No, it's you guys. The reason I brought it up too is because this is another problem and very calculated by these powers that we're talking about, the corporations who lobby, run our government, pay off politicians. Divide and conquer is how you maintain your power. It's on both sides. That's that documentary, that Netflix documentary is so good, the Who We Are. You're participating in it doesn't mean that it's your intent, but that other side uses to say, no, they're saying you're intentionally doing this, and then it's a personal attack. Do you know what I mean? And so it's this constant division.
I do.
It's not saying that we do need to figure this out. And our country was based on white supremacy. Going back to education and why they want to now teach the other side of the Holocaust. And they want their narrative to be what is considered good. Why, again, going back to education, had I not had my American Studies courses in college, I never would have known about the actual origins,
Right.
and I forget how old we are. So have to think about that too, with the rise of this, like we really got to nip this in the bud, and the defunding of education. All of that happened when I was in college. And all of those studies of the reality were at like a height of popularity, I feel like. And a lot of people in our generation had their eyes opened up to, hey, wait a minute. And we're now the generation that should be in power right now.
100. Okay, so yeah, and they're holding on to it.
They're holding on to it.
They're holding on to it because there is a quiet mechanism of white supremacy where that larger group that you're talking about, that I was saying doesn't want Black and brown people to have health care. And it's not that they're actively in the past, in the recent past, in our lifetime and a little bit beyond, it's not that they have been actively fighting against the increase of benefits to oppressed people.
Yeah.
It's that when they're in the voting booth and they have to make a decision between another, either $100 or maybe $1,000 increase in their property tax and kids not having lead paint in their schools. And the schools are, and those schools are predominantly Black and brown kids.
Yeah.
Those probably people of color, that they're going to pick, less property tax.
Absolutely.
They're going to pick paying fewer dollars. That is the most insidious form of racial and social oppression that we face. And I think what we're experiencing now, and I totally agree that this current generation and the generations that are around right now, they're not buying it. Gen X started to drink a lot of that Kool-Aid, and millennials are absolutely like, this is just not working. Yeah. And Gen Z is like, this is broken. We're going to tear this down. Yeah. So yeah, it's really scary for the people in power.
Well, I'd say too, though, I'm going back to the both sides, and we also have to start drawing attention to politicians shouldn't be making as much as they're making. Politicians in general, not Republicans, not Democrats. We, the people, have to come together as the system as a whole. The power of lobbyists, the power of stock trading. Yeah. While you're in power, that is absurd. The stock market is not.
Yeah. Stock market is not the economy. And
we showed in the timeline that guy who bought the stocks before he made executive decisions of are you kidding me? So that's where it's like that, because they want to draw the attention to these people are doing it and these people are doing it. And it's like, they're all doing it. Also, side note, how the fuck is Ron DeSantis only 3 years older than me? 4 years older than me.
What? How old is he?
He's 43.
I'm 43.
Ron DeSantis is the same age as you. Can you believe that? Is that not mind-blowing?
I don't know anything about his past, so he looks like he's a million years old. Yeah,
that's what I mean. Just look at him.
Well, that's what happens when you tell that many lies. Ugh.
Where's Anya?
Where's Anya?
Well, yeah, look at Steve Bannon. Good Lord.
He's 32.
Oh my God. We got way off topic.
Yeah.
It's all important, because if we're
you're just talking about editing and I don't know, whatever can fit in.
I need to stop speaking out loud when it comes to stuff like that, because I always end up screwing myself, self-sabotage. But this all ties to lead poisoning, though. They don't have the money to take care of us because the money they get is from the corporations, and they want to keep getting their money. All of them. Yeah. Getting back to Angela Rubino and Rome, Georgia, let's take a look at Georgia's lead levels. From Georgia's Occupational Health Surveillance, quote, lead is a soft, malleable, and heavy post-transition metal that is highly poisonous to animals and humans. It can be found both in the environment and in the workplace. As a neurotoxin, lead accumulates both in soft tissue and in bones. causing hypertension, cognitive dysfunction, adverse effects of renal function, and adverse effects on female reproductive outcomes. In the United States, about 90% of adult lead poisoning is caused by occupational exposures. The primary exposure pathways of lead are through inhalation and ingestion. In general, approximately 100% of inhaled lead is absorbed, compared with about 20 to 70% of that ingested. Adults are exposed to lead mainly by breathing in lead dust and fumes at work or from hobbies that involve lead, end quote. Now, this is news to me. The 100% inhaled lead is absorbed. And you compare it to what you get absorbed from ingestion, when that's always been the focus, is eating lead paint chips. So, quote, for example, construction workers are exposed to lead during the removal, renovation, or demolition of structures painted with lead pigments, end quote. So I'm going to go back to the woman featured in that Washington Post article who noted doing DIY home renovations. I am going to actually just quick pick up and share my screen quickly. So this is her Twitter, and I got to go to... This is one of the places in Rome, Georgia, that she had like as her, DIY flipping. And
nice columns.
Old as fuck.
Oh yeah.
And clearly probably has lead. So
oh yeah, this is like on the lead scale. This is guaranteed.
Yeah. So that's what that woman did. And now knowing that 100% of lead dust inhaled, or just lead inhaled, whether it be lead dust or fumes, is absorbed.
It makes sense to me. I mean, I saw this. I just picture I know it's really heavy. So like if you inhale it, I didn't have this thought before. If you inhale it and it goes into your lungs, it's a small particle, but I'm just picturing it not being able to escape. It's kind of finds a little place to sit and doesn't come out.
I feel like it's explaining a lot. And like we said, there's no way for us to really get to the bottom because it's very difficult to even get a lead test done. Oh, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, I of course had to look up what her parents did for a living because talk about somebody who exhibits a lot of symptoms of lead poisoning.
Right.
What did her father do? Oh, he's noted as owning Taylor Commercial Incorporated, which is, quote, a professional general contractor headquartered in Alpharetta, Georgia, that has been serving the multifamily industry since 1969. So there you go. There's always this connection.
Right.
I couldn't find what her mom did or if her mom worked. Like there was no information. And that's the other thing too that's so shady is like trying to find information. You really have to dig to find certain information where it's like, what are you hiding? You know,
you were telling me about that with what's his face first wife, that awful human being.
Oh, Clarence Thomas.
Clarence Thomas, yeah.
Too.
Yeah, super shady. You'd think that this would be like a lot of info.
Where her parent, like this is where she grew up, and this is
someone would have written an article,
Wikipedia page.
Yeah.
Like Marjorie Taylor Greene's Wikipedia page, I went, is like it's very, very calculated on how they wrote that. But obviously that made me have to, I'm going to share my screen one more time because I got to share this PDF. Going to this Georgia Occupational Health Surveillance PDF that I found. So if you scroll through, it shows you Georgia's blood lead levels, the difference between age groups, and worth noting how high it is in certain age groups, and male versus female. Look at how much more susceptible. And I mean, obviously too, like when we talk about occupational hazards, I did plan on this episode getting into lead's connection to testosterone because it does seem to affect men more than women. And I do have some studies about that, but we don't have time to get into it. I just feel like Lead-Blooded Americans is going to be its own continuation where we focus specifically on certain people. It definitely seems to affect testosterone differently than estrogen, which is pretty interesting. But if you go down here, I mean, but that's dramatic. Look at the difference between.
Oh, absolutely. And those are not comfortable numbers.
No.
That's a lot of micrograms.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is like a range of like from 14 to to like 3. Is that right? Am I reading that? Or 19 to 3.
Yeah.
Male to female
Yeah.
in one category. That's a huge jump.
And then so here it is by district.
Okay.
And you see the amount of cases, and they're all super high, except for South Valdosta, which I think they just didn't even bother doing it because there's no data there. And then you see
those people are putting lead into the earth.
Yeah.
They're de-leading.
They're putting it back.
That's -5 or less than 5.
Yeah. So there's Rome, like Northwest Rome, which it's high. DeKalb County or DeKalb District is, and West Central Columbus and Augusta, holy buckets.
Like they just given up.
Yeah. Shows you too where.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is a great PDF. But the important thing, obviously, again, certain industries are more likely to have lead exposure, such as manufacturers, ceramics, electrical components, plumbing fixtures, lead bullets, and rechargeable batteries. Lead exposure can occur not only during production, but also use, repair, recycling of the lead materials. We have to talk about the connection between this gun obsession and other countries have mental instability. Other countries have all of these factors, but the one factor they don't have is the guns and the gun culture.
Mm-hmm.
And we always talk about the guns, but we don't talk about the lead ammunition that they're constantly surrounded by. And we don't test.
Yeah.
So their cases too have consistently gone up. This sheet's a little outdated, but as we showed, the huge drop as far as that one district where Angela Rubino lives and the lead rising, the drop in that and the rise in lead as at the same years. It's just sad. Now, though, for something that's going to make us question everything that we've been discussing, that PDF we just looked at is only focused on your blood lead level. And that's always the indicator for how much lead is in your system that we've been told. And we've also discussed how lead replaces calcium in your body, but we haven't looked much into that. Remember when I brought up how Dr. Needleman was studying lead exposure from kids and he collected the baby teeth?
Yeah.
And you were like, oh, like, I wonder if is there a difference? And I said, I don't know. Well, we're finding our answer.
Yeah.
Well, doing research on this topic, I came across a study related to how just checking someone's blood lead level isn't enough and doesn't necessarily give you an accurate lead count. From a case report in a publication entitled Military Medicine from 2019, quote, there is a growing awareness of chronic exposure to lead, with recent evidence indicating that there is an increased risk of a range of health effects that include cardiovascular, kidney, cognitive, and premature mortality at blood lead levels lower than what was previously considered elevated. And notice how they don't say considered safe. They say totally elevated, which is the appropriate term you should be using. This report describes the case of a 42-year-old active duty officer with a history of anxiety, cognitive impairment, and paroxysmal hypersensitive episodes associated with elevated body burdens of lead as measured in bone, while having low or unremarkable blood lead level measurements.
So interesting. So apt to what we were talking about.
Yeah, an elevated body burden of lead may contribute to increased irritability, fatigue, and anxiety, mimicking post-traumatic stress disorder and other primary psychiatric conditions, end quote. Mm-hmm. I think about, too, the results that I got back. That's just looking at my blood. I don't know how much lead is in my bones. Everything talks about your blood lead levels. I've never, on all the studies that we've been doing, they don't talk about there being a different count.
Yeah, it's kind of like lead fatigue or a lead stress. And, for anyone listening and trying to wrap their head around it, another example of this might be someone who isn't even diabetic or pre-diabetic, but they have grown up around sugar. Maybe they didn't drink a lot of water as a kid. They drank a lot of juices or sodas. And again, they are not diabetic. They get a test and that switch isn't going to be flipped, but they've experienced decades of increased insulin production. Their body has had to filter all of that sugar and some of the toxins that have created from that. There's an increase in, cortisol and that adds to stress. And the overall effect of this is not diabetes. but it is this kind of like chronic stress from exposure.
It's a lot of things that you see in the news that they give you all these helpful tips of how to deal with without talking about this possibly being a reason for why you have them.
Yeah, who doesn't have this?
We said our exposure to lead, especially after all the wonderful things that Donald Trump decided to do, is dramatically on the rise in our country.
Yeah.
So, quote, environmental lead exposure is a recognized risk factor for hypertension, and the latest research shows significant associations between all-cause mortality, cardiovascular disease mortality, and blood lead levels as low as 1 microgram per deciliter. The National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health has designated 5 micrograms as the new reference blood lead level for adults, end quote. Catholic and Caps, is anyone talking about this? We have information like this, and it's just shocking that we don't talk about it.
Right.
But I was talking to my mom about it, and it's like she brought up, well, what about workers' comp and wrongful death cases?
Absolutely. We literally don't know how to price it. We could not budget for this change.
Yeah.
It would be a revamping of our economy.
Yes,
which is really scary.
And also knowing this now, that as low as 1, and that doctor wouldn't tell me my number, you have that. Well, we don't give that information out. Cool. Your blood lead level might not even be what's actually in your body.
Well, sure. And if you are at 0.3 and over the course of a year, you find that it's 0.7, what changed in that's significant. That's an over 100% increase. You should have enough control over your medical decisions and awareness. I'm saying this in America. I know it's hilarious. We should be empowered to ask the question of what has changed in my environment to increase this 100%.
Mm-hmm. None of it is safe. And like we said, like what's considered elevated, and why we're not allowed to, when we get our blood pressure done, even me as a vegetarian having to get my B count and my iron count and all those things. Why is my blood lead level not part of that makeup work?
Yeah.
Of that blood work to get done, even if it's only every 3 years. If my lead count has gone up, I need to know what's causing it. Especially
in the light of this chronic lead stress.
Especially in light with corporations not having regulations anymore, preventing them from not using it.
Totally.
So going back to this study, quote, primary sources contributing to both occupational exposure of lead and its environmental burden include battery manufacturing, painting industries, and explosives and ammunition. Populations at risk for health effects from chronic exposure include firing range staff and those with significant time training in shoot houses. And recent evidence indicates that military members are particularly at increased risk of exposure to elevated levels of lead. Iraq and Afghanistan present a higher risk of exposure, as they are 2 of 6 countries who did not comply with international standards of low lead levels in gasoline up until 2013. Lead residues from fuel exhaust can permeate the soil and contaminate food or groundwater. And an assessment of air quality in Afghanistan revealed that lead is one of the main causes of air quality deterioration, end quote.
So we had a war in Afghanistan for over 10 years before they changed this regulation.
Yep.
That is, it's good to know.
Yeah.
It's good to know.
And again, why were we even there in the first place?
Yeah.
It's not even where I'm going.
Freedom.
So we are far from done from this subject. And as is usually the case, this episode took a turn from where I originally started. But I have to go with my gut when it comes to that. And seeing that article in Rome, Georgia, with a woman who calls herself Burn It Down. Yeah. With the fall of the Roman Empire's linked to lead poisoning, it had to be discussed. We'll be touching more on the topic of lead-blooded Americans in future episodes, and also when discussing topics on our new spinoff coming called The Cult of Corporation. Because just a friendly reminder that lead toxicity is a worldwide crisis, And we do plan on looking at the larger scope when we have time, because this topic is a big old onion with a lot of layers, and we are going to peel back as many as we can. And once you do begin peeling back these layers, it becomes more and more shocking just how widely ignored and suppressed discussions about lead exposure are. Other than Ruby's, lead levels and like, oh, these are things you have to look at. Like, you can't eat paint chips, watch out for the toys, don't drink tap water. I feel like that's where a lot of people's understanding of lead ends.
Yeah, even that is problematic.
So this case study too, quote, given the numerous overlapping physical and behavioral symptoms of elevated body lead burden, patients who have yet to be diagnosed yet are suffering from ill effects of lead toxicity may initially present in psychiatric clinics. Lead toxicity frequently goes undiagnosed and should be considered in cases involving multiple comorbidities consistent with lead toxicity. And this study says, quote, we present a case of a military officer with episodic panic, hypersensitive crisis that was determined to be secondary to chronic lead exposure, end quote.
So fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And scary that we're not spotlighting this. Yeah, we're not talking about this.
With the rise of the mental instability and a lot of these people who are sucked into the alternative reality that Angela Rubino and other people following that Trump's alternate reality, they are the people that are the most at risk of lead exposure. And they're showing the symptoms, the hallucinations, the apathy, the anger. It appears to be so connected. Now we're going to go into the case of the military officer in this report over on Patreon and the extended version of this week's episode. So if you're interested in hearing more, please consider supporting the podcast on Patreon to unlock extended audio episodes and other bonus content. But you can also just read the rest of this case study by yourself on your own by heading to our sources that are listed under every episode description and learn more about how much we just don't know about our exposure to lead. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for tuning in to United States of Lead, hosted by Andrea Elizabeth and Paul Kramer. Want to know more about this subject? Consider making a donation on Patreon, where you can unlock extended video episodes and bonus content like deep dives and exclusive interviews. Just a quick disclaimer, Andrea and Paul are not experts in lead poisoning. We do ask that you check our sources and read up a little bit more on your own. Thanks again for listening.